Good morning. It's June 1st here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. Let's begin with stories making the headlines at this hour. Starting with yet another warning from the North on its plan to launch a spy satellite. The North Korean leader's sister Kim Yo-jong says the regime will correctly place the military reconnaissance satellites into orbit soon after they failed launch on Wednesday. We analyze when the next attempt may take place. And more warnings from Seoul and Washington to Pyongyang that the regime will pay the price for such a provocative act. More sanctions are also being considered. Starting today, the COVID-19 crisis level is lowered from serious to alert here in South Korea. Major quarantine rules like self-isolation and indoor masks are lifted. Just a day after their unsuccessful attempt to launch a spy satellite, North Korea has made clear that another attempt will take place soon. Now, this time, the regime leader's sister Kim Yo-jong spoke up, solidifying its 5-year military advancement plan. Our Shin Se-byuk starts us off.
Kim Yo-jong, the sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, says Pyongyang's reconnaissance satellite will soon be launched successfully into orbit to carry out missions, while reaffirming the North's resolute intention to develop reconnaissance means. This is according to a statement carried by Pyongyang's state-run Korean Central News Agency on Thursday. She also reiterated that Pyongyang is not interested in engaging in dialogue with the U.S., saying the regime has nothing to benefit from Washington's hostile policy. Kim Yo-jong's statement was released a day after the North's failed attempt to launch a military spy satellite. Early on Wednesday, Pyongyang fired off the space launch vehicle from Dongchangni in Pyeongan-buk-do province. It launched at around 6:29 a.m. and traveled in a southward direction before it fell into the West Sea due to engine failure. The attempt came only a day after Pyongyang spoke of its plan to launch a satellite into orbit sometime between May 31st and June 11th. Following the crash into the sea, Seoul's Joint Chief of Staff identified what they believed to be part of the projectile and retrieved it. They are now in the process of examining what was found. As for the reasons behind the failure, Seoul's intelligence agency points to the North's decision to suddenly shift the course of the vehicle towards the west, as well as a drastically shortened preparation process. Meanwhile, after the failure, the KCNA said that North Korea is currently analyzing what went wrong and will launch another rocket in the near future. To that, officials from Seoul's presidential office say the timing could come sometime before the 11th of this month, aligning with Pyongyang's previously shared timeline. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
And South Korea and the U.S. are once again voicing a collective warning toward the North that the regime will pay the price for such a threatening move. And more sanctions on the reclusive state may be on the way. Lee Seung-ja has more.
According to South Korea's ambassador to the United States, Choi Han-dong, on Wednesday, the North's recent failed launch of a military reconnaissance satellite has violated UN Security Council resolutions, and the country will face consequences. He stressed that the North's provocative actions will only lead to further isolation. Cho also noted that the regime will eventually conduct a second launch, but there would also be a price to pay for such action. Meanwhile, the U.S. National Security Council's coordinator for strategic communications, John Kirby, said Wednesday that North Korea must be held accountable despite the failed launch of its military spy satellite. According to Kirby, with each and every launch, whether a failure or success, the regime learns, adapts, and continues to develop military capabilities that are not only a threat to the Korean peninsula, but to the whole region. He added that the U.S. will continue to work with its allies and partners to hold Kim Jong-un and his regime accountable and to have the proper military capabilities in the region, including training and readiness to deal with those threats. In a resolution adopted by a majority of over 100 countries attending the International Maritime Organization's Security Committee meeting on Wednesday, condemned what they called a missile launch that seriously threatened the safety of seafarers and international shipping. Pyongyang rejected the resolution, saying that the missile test constitutes routine and planned self-defensive measures taken by a sovereign state to defend national security. It marks the first time that the IMO adopted a resolution condemning a North Korean missile launch. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And as soon as the North announced its official timetable for the spy satellite launch, they went ahead with that plan immediately. What's the significance behind the timing then? Our defense correspondent Kim Hyun-sung reports.
After North Korea unveiled its intent to launch a military spy satellite last month, it went into relative silence. No missile firings, no news of flashy weapons development. And then this, a satellite-carrying rocket launched into space on Wednesday. Why now? The timing might be more calculated than it appears. There's been a narrative painted by local reports that North Korea is making decisions haphazardly, leading to premature satellite launches and technical setbacks. However, experts are suggesting a different scenario. They're saying North Korea only made the decision because they deemed they were fully prepared.
By late Monday afternoon, they were likely in a state of full readiness, having identified no issues with the missile or the space launch vehicle. Given the absence of structural and data-related problems, they would have seen no reason to postpone the launch.
North Korea has been putting on the finishing touches for the spy satellite launch since April, and despite being a failure, it doesn't necessarily indicate a rushed attempt. It could be perceived as a stepping stone toward a long-term goal of successfully placing a spy satellite in orbit. Some also suggest that the timing was North Korea's plan to throw South Korea off, as North Korea's high-ranking military official Lee Byung-chul just on Monday said that North Korea will launch the spy satellite into space sometime during June.
Do you think Lee Byung-chul didn't know that they are going to launch a rocket today? He did. But then, why do you think he said that they are going to fire one in June? I think there is a possibility that they were trying to throw us into confusion.
North Korea's state-led Korean Central News Agency said there will be another attempt in the near future. But exactly when is hard to speculate. An official from South Korea's presidential office told Yonhap News Agency that the next launch may happen before June 11th, aligning with the timeline North Korea previously shared. Some experts beg to differ and think it may take months to rectify the problem and attempt another launch. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
Countries and organizations around the world are looking to build rules and regulations on AI over worries about the side effects of the technology. One is EU's AI Act that specifies requirements for developers of AI like ChatGPT, including provisions to make sure training data does not violate copyright law. For more, we're joined by Professor Jeannie Marie Peterson. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Good morning. The European Union is looking to make the AI Act into an actual law this year. Now, once that's approved, that will be the world's first set of rules implemented for AI, right? Now, what will that mean, and what's the significance of that law?
The law will have a far-reaching effect because it applies to any company that's dealing with EU citizens and is also accompanied by large fines. Interestingly, its main focus is not ChatGPT. Its main focus is manipulative systems and biometric identification systems. But even with ChatGPT, it will require greater transparency and measures for accountability.
Right, and it's not just the EU trying to implement such law. There was a Senate hearing with OpenAI CEO Sam Altman last month as well. Why do you think countries are stepping up to control the new technology? I mean, why are they so concerned or bothered in the first place?
Well, there's been a lot of hysteria lately about ChatGPT because it seems to have realistic conversations with people. And people like Sam Altman from OpenAI that developed that technology say it could be dangerous. It could be dangerous because it can manipulate the political process by producing images or text that seem real but are false, Recently, there was an image of the Pentagon on fire, for example, that was developed by a generative AI. So the concern is with the political process. I think this is a real concern, but I'd suggest that people like Sam Altman are trying to distract attention from the power and resources in their own companies, which are not shared equitably between countries and across the world.
Right, then that leads to our next question. Do you think, personally, the concerns are reasonable? I mean, is it really necessary to continue efforts to regulate artificial intelligence?
I think we should be regulating the companies that control the artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is statistics. It's the capacity of large computers to process vast amounts of data. Now, at the moment, most of that capacity sits in very large private companies. And that is a threat to democratic government, but it's a threat because there is a misapplication of power and responsibility. So I think we should be focusing on making the companies accountable rather than being distracted by the capacity of what is effectively a statistical process.
Sure, so not controlling the AI, the technology itself, but rather the companies who are taking those threatening moves, right?
Yes, I think so. And making sure that the benefits of the technology are available to all countries, not just a few companies. I think that is very important.
Right. And how effective do you think the new regulations will be if they are applied to those companies who have introduced the new technology? Can you give us an example of an area, where having an AI under control is beneficial, actually?
Well, AI can be beneficial in all sorts of ways. It can give us new insights into medical developments, health, education, finance. We can use it to speed up and make more effective the work that humans do. So I think it can be very helpful. I think it can also be problematic. We should be requiring transparency in the companies, the way companies are using AI, and we should be educating everybody to understand how the AI works so that they're not manipulated or confused by that technology. That takes a combination of laws. So the EU AI Act is a good beginning, but the most important thing is to have regulators and government that understand the technology and have the power to make sure it's used for human good, not to manipulate democratic countries and individuals.
Sure. Now, speaking of our country, South Korea is yet to take those steps to regulate AI yet, but is your country, by any chance, taking, or do you see any moves in the future to take similar regulative steps on the technology?
I think all countries are looking at this very seriously, and I think the main requirement that every country should be looking at is transparency. Transparency means that people who use an AI to communicate with other people have to disclose that it's an AI. So it's trying to get rid of the idea of tricks and scams. Now, we won't stop all bad actors using the AI, but we can develop the technology to at least keep the playing field relatively safe and also put special responsibilities on the companies that make the technology available to make sure it's used for good purposes, that it's shared equitably, and it's not used for hate crimes or political misinformation.
Right, as long as the new tech is used for good purposes around the world.
It's exciting. It can do great work for us.
Right, exactly. All right, Jeannie, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Melbourne this morning. Finally, in South Korea, the last few COVID-19 restrictions come to an end starting today. Now, that means no more mandatory quarantine if you catch the virus and no need to wear masks at medical clinics or pharmacies. Our Choi Soo-hyung has the details.
From Thursday, June 1st, South Korea's national crisis level for COVID-19 will be downgraded from serious to alert. After a battle lasting 3 years and 4 months, the lasting remaining antivirus measures are no longer required. First, there will be no mandatory self-isolation for confirmed cases of COVID-19. People who catch COVID-19 are still recommended to self-isolate for 5 days, but it is no longer mandatory. The indoor mask mandate at clinics, doctors' offices and pharmacies will be lifted, except for high-risk facilities such as senior care centers and hospitals. Incoming travelers will no longer be recommended to take a PCR test, and the testing centers for these travelers will be closed. The number of confirmed cases will now be reported weekly rather than daily. There are some concerns about easing regulations as COVID-19 has not been completely gone. However, the health authorities have determined that the situation in South Korea continues to improve, is being managed stably, and that the medical and response capacities are sufficient. Therefore, they announced the intention to transition from an emergency system to a daily management system.
The health authorities will follow a roadmap to adjust the crisis stage until COVID-19 becomes endemic, like influenza, and can be continuously managed, fulfilling their duty to protect people's health.
However, they stated that if a highly serious mutation occurs, they could consider raising the crisis alert level again. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
The International Atomic Energy Agency says Japan's method of analyzing contaminated Fukushima water was appropriate and that no significant radionuclides were found in the samples after their trip to the Fukushima nuclear power plant. The 72-page report focused on examining Japan's analysis of samples taken from contaminated water storage tanks. It stated that no additional radionuclides other than tritium were detected at significant levels. It added that any tritium left over after passing through the filtration system will be diluted below the standard and discharged. The latest report backs Tokyo's plans to release the wastewater into the sea and is also the 6th interim report by the IAEA on the Fukushima wastewater. And a Korean delegation was also in Fukushima for their own inspection last week. They say there has been some meaningful progress and will continue to work toward a more comprehensive analysis. Han Sang-woo has more.
After returning from their on-site inspections of the crippled Fukushima nuclear power plant last week, South Korea's delegation of 21 experts has concluded they will need more time to comprehensively assess whether it's truly safe enough for Japan to release the plant's wastewater into the Pacific Ocean beginning this summer.
Through the on-site inspections and the detailed data that's been collected, meaningful progress was made in terms of a scientific and technological review of the plant's facilities. But further analysis will be needed to reach a more accurate, thorough conclusion on the facility's performance adequacy and potential for long-term operation.
The head of the inspection team, Yuguki, said during a briefing on Wednesday, however, that the delegation managed to obtain various relevant data from Japan, including raw data on the radioactive water's concentration levels at the Advanced Liquid Processing System's entrance and exit, allowing them to determine how contaminated the water is before and after multinuclide removal treatment. He added that the team was able to examine the emergency isolation valves designed to immediately halt the discharge of ALPS-treated wastewater into the sea should an abnormality arise.
We confirmed on-site that extra, manually maneuverable valves were installed in case of the emergency valves don't work. The emergency valves were also designed to close automatically in the event of a power failure.
Yu cautioned, though, that the fact the power plant's facilities were installed according to design does not guarantee their performance. Moving forward, he said the delegation will examine more data coming from Japan and keep in touch with Japanese authorities for further inquiries. Han Sang-woo, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. The United States Pentagon has claimed that a Chinese military jet engaged in a, quote, unnecessarily aggressive maneuver near a U.S. military plane. It said the incident occurred in international airspace last week over the South China Sea while the U.S. plane was conducting what it called safe and routine operations. Now, footage from the event shows the Chinese J-16 aircraft cross in front of the U.S. RC-135 plane, leaving turbulence in its wake. A spokesperson for China's embassy in Washington responded that the U.S. needs to stop deflecting blame on China. And according to the Chinese military, the U.S. aircraft deliberately intruded into its training area. Now, relations between Washington and Beijing have been increasingly strained since former U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited the self-governing island of Taiwan last August, and the U.S. shot down a Chinese spy balloon off the U.S. coast in February. Now, a group of experts appointed by NASA to study unidentified flying objects has collected over 800 reports of mysterious events. The 16-member panel is tasked with finding ways that NASA can help understand unidentified aerial phenomena. It held a public meeting for the first time on Wednesday in Washington, D.C. The panel said that only a few of the reported incidents cannot be truly explained from a scientific perspective. It also shed light on factors that hamper work in the field, including NASA privacy limitations, stigma of reporting events, harassment of scientists, and data skewed by microwaves and optical illusions. Turning over to Hollywood, Godfather star Al Pacino is expecting his fourth child at the age of 83. He is reportedly having the child with his 29-year-old girlfriend, Noor Al-Fala. The actor is well known for his iconic roles in Scarface and The Godfather, and also won the Oscar for Best Actor for 1992's Scent of a Woman. He has 3 other children from 2 previous partners, and his youngest child is 22 years old. The news comes just a few weeks after it was revealed that actor Robert De Niro welcomed his 7th child at the age of 79. And finally, 7 ducklings born on the roof of an apartment block in the English city of Manchester were saved by a local duck rescuer. Avid bird lover and retired Royal Navy survival specialist Steve Stuttard carried out the rescue on Monday, releasing the ducklings near a quayside where they were joined by their mother. This is not the first such rescue for Stuttard, as the mother duck has reportedly nested on the roof for 4 years. Stuttard normally uses a bucket to slowly lower the ducklings to the ground. He avoids using the elevator as he says it's important not to disrupt the bond between the ducklings and their mother.
Good morning. The first day of June kicked off on a cloudy note. In fact, those in southern parts of the country will have another rainy day, with Jeju and the south coast to see rain from the morning gradually spreading to the rest of the south as the day goes on. And the further south you are, the heavier rain you'll see, with Gyeongsang, Namdo, and Jeju to receive 10 to 40 millimeters of rainfall expected, along with thunder and lightning at times. Meanwhile, it will stay partly sunny in the central areas, and it will be as warm as yesterday, but temperatures will drop a few notches along with rain in the south. Morning temperatures are similar to slightly lower than the same time yesterday. Air quality will be normal to good, except in Incheon, where dust levels will be high during the first half of the day. Rain in the south should let up tomorrow at dawn, with a rise in temperatures in the south, while the warming trend should continue through the weekend. That's Korea for you. Here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That'll do it for us. We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang this Thursday.